Welcome to the very first episode of Horizons on the Record. I'm David Sue, Chief of Staff at Jobs for the Future. We are a nonprofit aimed at transforming the education and workforce systems in America. Each year at JFF's Horizon Summit, we bring together thousands of leaders, experts, and opinion shapers with one shared goal: to build a system that enables economic advancement for all. In this episode, our CEO, Maria Flynn, will interview political leaders on the impact to workers and learners of the new infrastructure law and the Build Back Better legislation. Over the course of the show, we'll also be looking at some of the issues young people currently face when it comes to higher education. There is federal funding available to many in the U.S., but as we'll hear from one young man, the current help just doesn't go far enough. Cedric is one of the thousands of young people who are finding higher education a financial struggle.
My name is Cedric. I am 21 years old and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. Right now I'm kind of unsure what career field I want to pursue, but I know I want to do something that involves working with people and working with teams. I am a Pell grad student, but Pell doesn't cover everything. I still have a job on campus. I am a resident assistant for University Suites. It is really challenging having a job on campus and being a full-time student, but I'm still here in college and I'm still succeeding in all my classes, being sociable, being involved, and being a good representation of a full-time successful student.
So that was Cedric there. Thanks to him for sharing his story with us. And we'd love to hear your comments and questions on the issues that Cedric raised. You can send us your feedback at horizons@jff.org or Twitter at JFF Tweets, or on Facebook and LinkedIn. Our CEO, Maria Flynn, had the chance to put some important questions to the Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh. Maria worked as a senior executive at the Department of Labor for over a decade, so she knows firsthand the impact that the department can play in creating more opportunity.
Well, Secretary Walsh, thank you for being here, part of our very first Horizons on the Record show. And just want to start by getting your reflections on the job numbers.
You know, when you look at the job numbers today, 210,000 jobs added to the economy. The forecast is predicted, I think, double that. But every month that I've been doing this, the numbers have been off. A couple of times we've gone over, but they've been off. But I think when you have to look at the recovery here with President Biden, you have to look at the whole picture. And from the time he took over as president, he's added almost 6 million jobs to the economy. The unemployment rate has dropped nearly 2 full points. This month's reports, we saw gains in construction, manufacturing, and transportation, which is areas where we historically haven't seen them. So, you know, we're on a pathway to opportunity, but we still have more work to do.
I would agree. We're definitely on a path to opportunity. And kind of as we speak, our friends over here in Congress are debating the Build Back Better legislation. Yeah. And so how do you see kind of the jobs numbers as we're seeing them now? How does that underscore the need for this new legislation?
Well, one aspect of it, when I looked at the jobs report and when I've kind of, in the last couple months, looked at those areas, there are certain sectors that need greater investment as far as job training, in nursing and healthcare, in trucking, in the truck drivers industry, and other areas. And in the Build Back Better reconciliation package, there's billions of dollars for job training and workforce development money and apprentice programs. Yep. So we have an opportunity to get that money and make targeted investments into industries in our country that, quite honestly, that are either needing the support or emerging. And we also have an opportunity with the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed for job training. And you know, I was out in LA yesterday, and we were talking to women in the trades. Yep. And you know, with having investment in pre-apprentice programs, we could really create better pathways for women into the building trades and people of color into the building trades that don't necessarily exist today. Yep. And so we could open up a whole new industry for people that might not be thinking about it if we had the resources to make those investments.
And I know you had a lot of activity recently around National Apprenticeship Week, and thank you for being part of JFF's event that week as well. And so how do you see kind of, as you said, like those pieces fitting together, right? Kind of increasing the diversity and equity within
Well, I think we have to be intentional about it, number one. And certainly in my time as mayor, I've learned that. Number two, we have to really create, how do we go out, people don't know what industry to look for if they don't know what's available. Yep. So go find them and say to people, you have a real opportunity here. You know, yesterday, I think on the job site I was on, it was a related bill project. There was 63 women on the project altogether working, which seems like a big number, and it is a big number. but there's no reason why it can't be 600 women.
Right.
And there's no reason why we can't have more African American and Latino women and people of color work on these projects. And so I think people think that it's not attainable for them, that they can't work construction, when as a matter of fact it is. And I think that we have to, like I said, be intentional about how we do it. And that's why I think the Build Back Better, one of the pieces of Build Back Better is really important. And the second piece of that is childcare.
Yes.
There was a young woman there, she was a painter in the Painters Union. She was a second-year apprentice, and she just had a child. And I was asking her, how hard is it to work on a construction site, when you have to work at 7 a.m. to 3 and you have kids? And she has family to help her. Not everyone has a family member to help them. So we need to think about healthcare, childcare in a whole different manner. Childcare isn't 9 to 5. If you're working in industry construction, you need 6 to 6. So there's things that we have to do here.
Totally agree about childcare. We're actually filming this here outside of the Labor Department building where I worked for 16 years. Including when I was a new mom. And so I just really appreciated the ability to bring my baby in with me, use the on-site childcare.
It's great too for people. I mean, if you're a mom or a dad and you want to go down and see the baby,
Absolutely.
The baby's not feeling well in the morning, you run downstairs.
Yep.
It's great to have it here. And plus, for me, we had it at City Hall, and we're not fully back here yet, but it lifts the building too.
Absolutely.
It lifts the building.
Absolutely. And so, speaking of Boston, when you were mayor, you really prioritized workforce development in your tenure there.
Yep.
And what advice do you have for other local elected officials? How can they really put jobs and workers and kind of equity and opportunity at the forefront of their
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is bring really good people in. And I had an amazing person, Trin Wynn, running my economic development office in Boston. Bring good people in that are dedicated, committed to it, and be focused and set goals.
Yep.
And measure those goals and make sure you're hitting the targets. And if you're not, realign what you're doing. And I think that that's important. We also created an office of financial empowerment along with workforce development. So while we're helping people better themselves in their place, we also help them with filing their taxes. We help them with building credit. So when they do get into those jobs, they have opportunities to buy homes. They're not fixing their credit then later on. So there's a whole package there. And so I would say that to mayors or governors or whoever it might be, if you want to make the biggest impact for people, really focus on your workforce development office and give it the power it needs to be successful.
Yep, I love that. And I know when you were out in LA, you're also touring the ports, right?
Yep.
So a lot of issues right now around supply chain.
Yep.
How do you look at the workforce development component of that and how we kind of build the talent that's needed to really help that supply chain keep moving?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, one of the areas that we clearly have a shortage in or a gap in, I guess you could say. I mean, I don't know if there's a shortage, but a gap is in truck drivers.
Yep.
And you think about that. So not everyone can just wake up one day and all of a sudden drive an 18-wheeler or a 16-wheeler. You have to be trained in that. So we're working here at the Department of Labor on coming up with a program and how we create opportunities. So that's one area, I think, in that area. And then you also have other jobs at the port. I mean, we all think the port is longshoring, in trucking, but there's jobs inside. There's office jobs there too. So really creating pathways in those jobs too is important.
That's great. Awesome. So what excites you the most looking ahead to the next 3 or 6 months?
Well, what excites me is that we have a president that really wants to create and give pathways into the middle class, and working for Joe Biden and working for President Biden, I should say, and focus on that excites me. And really working to carry out his vision is something that excites me. As mayor or as a state representative or the head of the building trades, my job was to try and create opportunities and pathways for people to better themselves. And we have a president of the United States of America that feels strongly about this. It's great working for somebody like that.
That's great. And when you were mayor, you had to work on a bipartisan basis with a Republican governor. Are there lessons that you think others kind of on Capitol Hill and others can kind of learn about how do you work?
Yeah, there's no question about it. I think that we have to break down these barriers in some cases of Democrats and Republicans and put the American people first. I think the president was able to do that. We saw it with the infrastructure bill, getting support from both sides of the aisle. And it's unfortunate right now with the Build Back Better bill that we don't seeing that, because the investments that we're making into communities all across America, they're going to go into Republican communities, they're going to go into Democratic communities, and the American people need those. So, I think it is important. I think it's important to have those. We'll have differences, there's no question about it. But we have to keep finding common ground. The American people expect that and deserve that.
What do you think the private sector can be doing kind of in this moment to support their workers?
I think a better collaboration with government officials in government. You know, I've spent a lot of time as the mayor reaching out to business communities in the private sector, and as Secretary of Labor I've done the same, and it's working. And really thinking about some of these opportunities for job training, workforce development, it's not all going to be government investment. Yeah. Some of it can be private sector investment. We can help them create programs. So I think that I've had some great conversations with businesses already about building those relationships.
One more question on cross-agency collaboration. So I know when I was at DOL, we did a ton of work with the Department of Ed and other agencies. Yep. How are you and your kind of fellow cabinet members working together on some of these issues?
We're working really closely. So one example is myself and Secretary Raimondo of Commerce. Years ago, Commerce and Labor were together, and then everyone kind of took sides and said, not anymore. With Commerce and Labor, we work collectively together with education. So when you think about job training, you think about commerce, the businesses, you think about training, the Department of Labor, you think about education, Secretary Cardona. There's an opportunity for us to really do some amazing things. We've begun those we've been doing that since we've been here now for about 6 months, all of us. And then also working across all the agencies. There's an opportunity for us to really, you know, the President and this cabinet, we're close. So we do work very closely together. I mean, there's an intersection with everyone.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Really
Thank you.
Appreciate the conversation.
Appreciate it.
Some of the points raised there by Secretary Walsh are issues that are affecting many young people who are trying to carve out a better future. Kayla lives in Florida, and her goal is to go back to school, but changing paths is proving very tough. Let's hear more.
My name is Kayla. I am 21 years old and I live in Tampa, Florida. I graduated high school, class of 2018, and made my way into community college. I originally went to school to study communications. After the second year, I realized that it wasn't what I was passionate about. It was very stressful. I didn't have much guidance on where to go from there when I did decide to leave. I landed an amazing job at a doctor's office as a medical assistant. I would like to be a nurse in the future. Going back to school while working full-time could be a bit of a struggle if you don't have the funds to go back.
Kayla's story is one that is shared by many young people across the country. Maria put some of the questions Kayla raised to Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, who represents the 1st District in Oregon. It was a chance to chat more about the local and national impact of the infrastructure bill and Build Back Better.
There are many critical conversations about jobs, workers, and the economy happening in D.C., and both the executive and legislative branches have key roles to play. I am thrilled that we have Congresswoman Bonamici from Oregon with us today to bring the legislative branch perspective. Thank you, Congresswoman, for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So I know it is certainly a busy time and an important time
Indeed.
on Capitol Hill right now. And conversations about the infrastructure package, about Build Back Better, appropriations conversations all happening. If you could just talk a bit about what excites you the most kind of as part of this process and some of the ideas that are being talked about regarding America's workers.
Happy to. There's a lot that excites me about the combination of the infrastructure bill and Build Back Better. Now, my passion is really education and having a path for everyone, regardless of what career they choose. And there is so much in this combination of legislation, the infrastructure bill with the roads, the bridges, the EV charging stations, the jobs that will be created by the need for all of the infrastructure, but also in Build Back Better, which is really going to make a difference in people's lives and kind of level the playing field with the economic opportunity, from childcare and pre-K to great workforce programs that are going to be there for people to skill up and get all those great jobs that we'll have, not only in the transportation infrastructure, but also transitioning to a clean energy economy and in the care workforce. So there's a tremendous amount of potential.
Absolutely. I love those themes of equaling the playing field, pathways for all. Like those are really at the heart of what we do at Jobs for the
Absolutely.
Future. And so within Build Back Better, how do you kind of see those provisions really helping workers as the nation rebuilds? Like, how do you think about, reskilling and other efforts as part of that?
Right. In the short term, there are some great programs, both through the Department of Labor, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act programs, our great job training program, Job Corps, there's a Climate Conservation Corps. There's a lot of provisions in there that will help people get good jobs, and in the care economy as well, and skill up to do the jobs that will be there. And then in the long term, there are great provisions for education, starting really early with pre-K, universal pre-K, and then of course in our K-12 system with career and technical education, and with more affordable higher education, and just having those paths. I'm a big supporter. I went to community college, so there's a great industry partnership program where community colleges can partner with businesses in the area and make sure that they're offering skills there for the demand in that local area. So when we see kids getting a good start in life, and then in our K-12 system, making sure that they have those hands-on learning opportunities that will help them choose a path.
And with registered apprenticeship, some of the work that we're doing at JFF focus on that is to really help expand diversity, equity, inclusion within registered apprenticeship programs.
Absolutely. And making sure that those registered apprenticeships are there for people historically left behind, women, people of color. I remember sitting around a big table with several people who had gone through pre-apprenticeship programs and apprenticeship programs. And a woman named Lacey said, "This made such a difference in my life. Now I can support my family." And so really opening up those opportunities. I give a shout out to Oregon tradeswomen. We have a higher percentage of women in the trades in Oregon because we have this great organization that really does make those opportunities available. We need to replicate that across the country because these are good jobs. And as we're building this infrastructure and as we are transitioning to a clean energy economy, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for good jobs. We need to have those programs there to skill people up. And make sure that they have a good job in their community, and they have the skills and a path to get them.
What advice do you have for the folks in our audience who are working at the state and local level? How can they kind of support this effort? How can they be prepared, to really successfully implement the provisions of these pieces of legislation and ensure that we're using these federal funds to drive equity and to drive high quality outcomes across the board?
Certainly staying in touch with their representatives and senators and any agencies that are involved. We're trying to make sure as we craft the legislation that the dollars will go directly to their intended jurisdiction to get the funding out as quickly as possible and as equitably as possible. So we're trying to build that in as much as possible into Build Back Better so that those opportunities will be there. And of course there'll be some scaling up, and particularly in places like childcare and pre-K. We're going to be working on making sure that we have affordable childcare, which has been a huge challenge to parents who are working outside the home for quite some time, exacerbated by the pandemic, of course. But we will have the ability to help not only get more people into the field, more providers into the field, but also make sure they can make a living wage.
Exactly.
I've had childcare providers say it's so hard to keep people working here because they can go across the street to a fast food restaurant and make more money, even though they're doing critical work of taking care of our nation's children. So it's important to have this investment. There's no solution to that. You can't raise the tuition because it's already expensive, but we need to make sure that the people doing this critical work are compensated for the value of the work that they're doing in the care economy.
I agree, and I think that the facet approach is really key, right? So kind of making those high quality services accessible, but also ensuring that the workforce is being taken care of and that these are quality jobs is key as well. So that's what I really like about the approach that's being debated. And I know last year you proposed a bill that focused on reskilling for workers in energy-related fields. And I know you've been a big supporter of kind of sector strategies in general. So maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Sure. Well, I'm the granddaughter of a coal miner. My grandfather, who immigrated from Italy, was a stonemason in Italy and came to the United States and became a coal miner. And I know that when we transition away from fossil fuels to a clean energy economy, the communities have not been affected equally. There's been a disparate impact on oftentimes communities of color, low-income communities, urban communities, because of historic redlining, for example. So we need to make sure that we are targeting the industries and the areas where they've been hardest hit, and make sure that we have not only the jobs there, but the path to get those jobs for the hardest hit communities. So if we pass the funding for the infrastructure, but we don't have the people to do the work, we're not going to get the infrastructure built. So that is a really key piece of it as well, and that's why I've been advocating for robust funding for workforce as we build back better, and we'll continue to do so.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Congresswoman, for being with us today. Really appreciate you joining us.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for your ongoing support of the American worker.
That was Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici talking to Maria. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on the issues they discussed. You can send us your comments and questions by email to horizons@jff.org or reach out to us on Twitter @JFFTweets.
While you're watching Horizons on the Record, multitask for a second and mark your calendar on June 7 and 8 to save the date and join us in New Orleans for the JFF Horizon Summit. Our annual event elevates the on-the-record conversations, connects the dots across major themes such as the integration of learning, and work with speakers you want to hear from, people you want to meet or reconnect with in person, and focus on a future of work that enables economic advancement for all. Learn more at horizons.jff.org.
So we've heard from some political leaders on the opportunities that the Build Back Better legislation can provide for workers and learners. I had the chance to dive deeper with two former senior Department of Education officials, both of whom now run influential nonprofits. So joining me now is the CEO of the Education Trust, Denise Forte, and the President of the American Council on Education, Ted Mitchell. Both are longtime practitioners and leaders in the policy community. So Denise and Ted, thank you for joining us today. As we're recording this, Congress and the White House are talking about the Build Back Better legislation. So Ted, I wonder if you could just start by telling us, if you could give us some sense of the implications of this bill. Like, how big of a deal is this?
Sure. I think it's a huge deal. And I think that the important thing, and I think Denise and I are allies in this, is thinking about it not just as a one sector, two sector, three sector initiative, but this really is the largest single investment that the federal government has made in education since the Great Society programs. And so whether you think about pre-K or the work for college and beyond, this is a big deal.
Both Ted and I would agree that there is more to do. I think there's certainly some big steps that were made in higher ed, whether it's the increase in the Pell Grant, the eligibility around Pell Grant. We now include DACA. That's very exciting. The information and availability of these new completion grants to help kids stay in school. Again, we want more, but it's a good start.
So speaking of wanting more, free community college did fall out. What do you think the odds of that are coming back?
I think at this point, that's pretty baked, which is really unfortunate. There was a big opportunity here to get more kids into school and not have the debt afterwards. There was a big opportunity for students of color, students from low-income communities. But honestly, the free college movement, I don't think it's going to stop. We have to keep going. But it was very disappointing that that fell out.
We supported free community college. We also supported doubling the Pell Grant. And while we didn't get free community college, the increase didn't get to double. The increase in the Pell Grant will provide significant opportunities to some of those very same students to pursue, whether it's a community college or a four-year college degree. So, and I think one of the things that's interesting about all of these programs is we're going to learn through them. As they're implemented, as they're deployed, we're going to learn what works, and hopefully we'll build smart policy.
So there is a lot of talk generally about higher ed and workforce needing to be more aligned. And there's a lot of workforce funding, there's a lot of education funding, a lot of it is siloed. Some of it comes together a little bit. There are the community college and industry partnership grants. I wonder if you think that there's any impact that this legislation will have about bringing together higher ed and workforce.
I think that one of the things that's happened in the last 4 to 5 years is even the most traditional higher education institution has understood very clearly from their students and families that jobs at the end of the path are really important. And so I think that in addition to a general wake-up call, this legislation provides some of the bricks and mortar to be able to move from the idea to actual reality.
The tough thing, we know that 4 out of 10 African Americans and Native American students are not completing. They're having real completion problems. And the same thing goes for our white students. So something needs to be done. And hopefully, again, foot in the door, we encourage more states to take this up. And completion programs will start seeding, I think, some evidence around there.
So there had been some talk about this reconciliation package reducing child poverty by 50%. And that's the overall thing. But what do you think about some of the equity implications of the higher ed and workforce provisions?
Oh, I think they're big. Look, we have an opportunity, certainly with the increase in Pell Grant, to make college more affordable. These completion grants, again, getting kids to stay in school.
Across the country, issues of disaggregated outcomes have really become the way that college and university leaders and communities think about their success. And the Build Back Better programs that are going to be supported target those communities in ways that we really haven't done specifically before.
What do you think has been missing from some of the news coverage about some of these stories? You know, you mentioned the Dreamers, rural students, older students. Is there anything that hasn't gotten traction that you think is going to be potentially important in here?
There's a lot of support out there for teacher prep, meaning how we prepare teachers for the classroom, and increasing the number of diverse teachers so we have a more diverse educator workforce. Everybody probably knows the research, but it's pretty dire out there when you look at the number of teachers of color in the classroom who are, there are a ton of them out there that are very successful, but we need more. So hopefully more people will start talking about that as well.
Missing piece is teacher ed. And I think that that's one we're really going to have to come back around, both in terms of absolute numbers, but the diversification of the teaching force is an absolute must across the country. I think in terms of what's gotten short shrift in the press, I think that DACA and the eligibility of DACA students for federal aid is a huge, huge step forward for this country. And I hope that we're able to celebrate that at the signing of the bill. I think the other thing that we don't talk enough about, I think that free community college and that whole debate has taken up a lot of time, and it should. But one of the things that Pell Grants do quite marvelously is provide opportunities for students, financial opportunities that address directly the kinds of things that students tell us are standing in the way of their completion: childcare, transportation, food, housing insecurity. And Pell Grants, because of their flexibility, can cover not only tuition, but those costs that are the real impediments for student success.
Ted, you also mentioned the Department of Commerce, which is not always in these conversations. I wonder, and we did have the Secretary of Commerce, Labor, and Education at Horizons this past summer, and they said that was the first time that they had all spoken together. But I wonder how you think that they fit into this mix, where it's often an education and labor crowd.
And they've stepped forward, and they have both acknowledged the need for commerce to play a role in building up communities of industry, education, partnerships, and to make that a way for U.S. industry and U.S. entrepreneurship to build. And I think that impetus, combined with the Labor Department's focus on workforce development and the Education Department's industry-leading voice and the people who are doing the training, I think is a great combination.
Well, thank you very much, Ted and Denise, for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Really great. Thank you, David.
We hope you enjoyed the first episode of Horizons on the Record. This is a show that discusses real issues facing Americans and how we can work together to find the solutions. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can share your questions and comments via email at horizons@jff.org and on Twitter at JFFtweets. And you can keep up to date with our work at jff.org. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.